Co-Creation.loft Berlin. I'm here with Hanno. How are you doing, Hanno?
All right. I'm the exhausted warrior today.
And what's got you so exhausted at the moment?
My busy mind and too much travel.
And what are you traveling around for business or pleasure?
See, the ideological answer would be it's always both,
Yes.
which is of course a lie.
Yes, yeah.
No, it was mostly work this week, like real work. Yeah.
And what is it that you're doing when you're working with these people?
Yeah. Well, this week basically I think I help people find the most relevant questions they need to ask to, start solving the issues they face. So I would say it's strategy work this week. Yeah.
All in all, you would say it's strategy work? It's just like finding the right questions to answer?
Well, again, the ideological answer would be, of course.
Yeah.
Because every shit agency today does nothing but strategic work, supposedly. The real answer, of course, is not always, but ideally, because I feel that the relevant things I do and we do always have to do with the substance and the essence. And whenever you deal with the essence, I think it has a lot to do with strategy and who do I want to be in the future. So,
Resolution, resolving things, bring things to conclusion, maybe?
Letting things go. Yeah.
And so, just for our viewers at home, what kind of people are you working with in general? Are you working with corporate agencies, or what's your speciality?
There's a huge breadth over the last years in my life, and actually also this year. So we're working with big, evil corporations. We're working with small, good NGOs. We're working with public institutions, and also all these middle-sized, family-owned companies which you have all over Germany.
Right, and you're basically like solving their problems, you're working through things with them, you're talking with them. And what do they get at the end of the day when you walk out of their company or their room? What are they feeling? What are they...
Well, I think, in the essence, they feel more confidence that things can be done. A belief in a world that is actually alterable, in a world that can be changed by themselves. So I think it has a lot to do with a feeling of self-efficacy in the end. And then ideally, of course, specific ideas for solutions. What can I do different, right? But this is classic systemic consultancy work. So we come in, we help them find questions, always based on the assumption that good answers lie within the social system we work with. We do not come with ready-made responses. No.
Yeah, and so when you say systemic, what do you really mean by that? What's a quick summary of this whole idea of systemic work that we hear so much about?
Yeah, that's an awful question.
If I wasn't, I'm here for nothing but. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I think one part of the definition I gave you already, so systemic work always assumes that, you co-create answers with people who have the issue they want to face. So they do not outsource it to me, but we find it with them. And what I strongly believe is that systemic work always includes the inner perspective, the outer perspective, the individual perspective, the collective perspective. Because only if you have this continuous perspective changes and basically leave the shoes you stand in your everyday lives, you will be able to define a new perspective and thus new answers. So I think it has a lot to do with perspective change and really letting the everyday mode of how you do things go.
Okay, so it's a little bit different than, so to speak, your average consultant that just goes in there and says, I'm going to solve this problem, but also you're zooming out and seeing that person as a system within other systems.
Yes, absolutely.
and not only solving that person's problem, that one system, you're actually helping the systems be more symbiotic, work together.
Beautiful, yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and really to help people understand that, you know, the problem they have individually usually mirrors something which happens in the organization, and the problems they have in their organization usually mirrors something which happens in society as a whole, right? So basically we are fractals of something bigger, and when you look at the fractal, which can be a tiny person and a tiny issue, it always mirrors what goes on in the bigger whole. And this is something I really do believe in. So whenever we fly in and work with someone, we try to give them the outside perspective. So basically, you know, think about what happens in society as a whole. I mean, what are the huge shifts you notice and you think about, and now let's talk about, you know, the everyday stuff that goes on in your organization, and now what do you see? So basically help them kind of interweave these levels, which usually are very separated in how we see the world and also how we, you know, basically carry ourselves within these different worlds. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's like, and that's the conscious spin of it, I guess, that it's not only, we're not going in there and just helping people be better at being evil, we're helping them be better at engaging in the world around them and making the world a better place, essentially, seeing the world.
Yeah, I would say that. And I mean, that's, you know, I mean, I try to be ironic when I said evil corporations, but of course, I mean, every organization does good and bad in this world, just as we as individuals do good and bad in this world. And what I'm trying to, you know, I'm trying to raise awareness in the people I work with when it comes to the question, I mean, what is actually what do I contribute to the bigger whole? How do I further what I individually deem worthy and good by what I do in my everyday life? That's really what drives me. Yeah.
And I find that absolutely beautiful and completely relevant to the current state of affairs in the world, and that, you know, that we need to see ourselves as a part of a system. And what also interests me is what if there's some moments where people have really had that perspective change. Are there any moments that you can remember, either in the past or recently, where you've spoken to somebody and they've zoomed out a little bit and seen this scope and this system within systems?
Yeah, I think so. This week alone. So to give you an example of what I did, I went to Tuscany on Tuesday evening to work with a firm that they have their yearly strategy retreat somewhere in the, you know, beautiful hillside southwest of Florence, and they thought and fought so much about their own organizational transformation, and I think they completely ignored, just to, you know, make things a little less complex, what happens in the outside world. But when you transform as an organization these days, of course you transform in times of transformation. So you have to kind of acknowledge what goes on around me and what does it have to do with what we, you know, want to do and the state we are in. And I think we had a very short session, it was like 6 hours. But my feeling was that when I left, that they really kind of, you know, they broadened the angle of how they looked at things. And it gave them more breathing space and really space to move and generate new ideas. It became a little more flexible and, I don't know, less, how can I say this? Less stressed out. Yeah. Sometimes it helps to make things more complex because you realize that you're actually not very important.
Perfect. And also that idea of transforming within a time of transformation, I find that a very satisfying or fascinating idea. That that kind of businesses, individuals, political parties all need that these days, because transformation is only occurring faster and faster.
Yeah.
and we can no longer change individually, slowly but surely, so to speak, in a sense that as an island, the transformation has to take place within the constant and growing transformation. And so, flexibility, that's a very interesting thing to be able to bring to the world as well.
Well, it's actually very interesting what you say, because I believe that there's really a rising awareness that, as you say, we're not islands. We cannot shut ourselves away from what happens in the world around us. And the more this world feels like it's going to shit, the more people realize, okay, wherever I go, I cannot seclude myself from this. And I'm actually part of this, and so what could I do to help improve things again? It's really interesting that this political crisis somehow increases the awareness of how interconnected everything is. I find it very fascinating, even in contexts that are not political and that usually have no societal, consciousness, so to speak. So this is happening, and also I feel that people understand, when you bring in that perspective, people understand that, of course, every time is a time of transformation. Wherever you are in history, and every moment in our life is a moment of transformation. But I think what changes now is that people realize, okay, we're in a moment in history where we can actually renegotiate what is normal. What is work? What is organization? What does society mean? All these things start to shift now and become more and more fragile, in their understanding, which used to be hegemonic. And now suddenly we realize, okay, this feels very unstable, but it's also highly exciting because we could come up with understandings that are actually more meaningful and that are, that create lives or help create lives that have more depth and more intimacy and more purpose and so on and so on. So I think that it's an excellent moment to do the work I do. And I never planned to be a consultant, for the record. And
that's the record I would love to get into. The record of what brought you about to this particular career, and also who the hell you are as a process of transformation as Hanno. So there was some really interesting things that I wanted to get into in that, but let's get into the story a little bit first, and then we can deep dive into, to use your terminology, into those very fascinating topics a little bit later. So, what are some of the sights and smells of Hanno's childhood? What was going on there?
Oh God. Not a very happy time, I have to say. I could feel sadness when you ask. So I don't know. I think my history is a very German history, because I think in my family we mirror the collective trauma the society kind of carries in our small social system. So I feel that a lot of the shadows I grew up with were actually not the shadows of my parents, but something which was a lot older, and which has a lot to do with Nazi times and everything that was happening around it and then within us. So what are my memories? I think it's a very long story of detachment and alienation, which lasted for about, I would say I woke up when I was around 25. Yeah. And everything before that is like, memories are blacked out. I was a very different personality back then, and it doesn't feel very lively. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can relate to that.
Sorry. Yeah, you
there's
can.
There's nothing sorry about that.
Yeah.
There's, I can relate to that deeply in my personal life as well. And I guess being able to look at the world as something that can be transformed is the tool set that you get really when you've grown up that way.
Yeah.
And luckily, change is really the only thing that is constant. And so we are both very, very lucky to be in the field of helping change and moving along with change.
Yes.
And so what happened when you were 25 that allowed us to wake up? Never mind, this is going to be edited, so whenever you want to say, let's cut it, then we just cut it.
Fine. It's fine. I say it's fine because I deeply believe that basically the sorrow that's within us and the wounds we overcame, and so that kind of the shadows I wouldn't say left behind, but which were outgrown by the light within us. All these things are marvelous resources because, as you say, what I managed, and I think this is the only thing I'm truly proud of in my life, is I reinvented myself because I knew that the toolbox I received when I was little would not help me to lead a autonomous, happy, meaningful life. And I see the last 10 years as, let's say I see the last 35 years as a journey of, seeking what the good life could look like and how I can create a positive footprint that leaves something behind which helps to spread light throughout this world and warmth throughout this world instead of this black hole I come from. So, and to respond to your question, I think there were several moments which were very defining. One of them was when I came back from the United States, where I lived for a year around 2005. I came back to Berlin because rural Michigan was not my place, and I realized. And when I came back here, I realized, okay, I need to come back here, but the old life I have is nothing I really want to go back to. And then I came back here and panicked and quit everything. I quit my plan to basically stay in university, which was the idea back then, I guess. I quit the relationship with my longtime girlfriend back then. Well, long time for a young person. It was like 4.5 years, but still, it was a very relevant relationship, very formative for both of us. I don't know, I looked for a new apartment, I found a new job, like everything was new somehow. And everything was really very lost and painful. And in that time, I decided that I want to lead a gay life because I knew I had this in me, but it never really had space in the outer world and in how I lived. And it was just awful. Like for a long time, it was just awful to basically redefine myself in a setting where so much is or feels predefined by others. And I think that was really the start of basically, shedding skin after skin after skin over the next years. But that was really like the starting point. And the next point was, because basically what I did was I came back and said, okay, well, I'm going to change some things, but I think I stayed very attached to my general attitude towards this world, which was a very negative attitude and a deeply fearful and angry posture in how I carried myself in this world. And I still have a lot of this anger in me, but it's a lot less than back then. And so I carried on and carried on. I started my own business, and I worked 6 years in politics, and I worked in journalism for a year. And so I had, I don't know, like every year I started new somehow. And then in 2013, I hit a wall. From the outside perspective, it looked like my most successful year. So that was my first year where I did like 100%, self-supporting freelance work. I had a corporate client. I earned well, for Berlin standards back then, but still. But I was so burnt out and so sad and depressed and empty and like really in the dark. That was a very bad place. And I remember this one moment when every morning, it was summer, every morning before I had my jour fixe at the clients around 8:30 a.m., which is it's very early for me. I hate getting up early. So every morning still I went to the pool, the public pool before I went to the clients. And then one morning I swam in this pool and I realized, okay, I cannot do this anymore. I have to stop now, otherwise I will die. Because like my whole body basically was in opposition against how I lived and perceived and thought. And for some reason, that's exactly what I did. I quit everything. I quit my clients. I didn't accept new ones. I think I realized that I could not continue with the mindset and tools I had, and just hit a wall and did nothing for a while. And it was awful as well. It was really awful.
Yeah.
Especially because summer was over and now it was like September, October, November, and it got grayer and grayer and grayer. And I was severely sick. I had a bad angina and bronchitis, and I was like half dead. But at the same time, I realized, okay, this is the right thing I need to do. I just need to stop all this and, look for something better. There needs to be something better. And that's, to me, and then I can stop this monologue, but to me, this is one of the miracles that, you can do things and they may feel awful in short-term perspective, but even though you cannot know it, this is the right thing to do. I need to walk down there, even though everyone tells me, what the fuck are you doing? So I did that. And I started therapy, and I found a marvelous woman who helped me basically understand my system, me, as one system, instead of treating just my physical symptoms. And I started my training as a systemic consultant, which really made me look at the world in many new ways, I would say. And slowly, I recovered. I didn't recover, I uncovered something new. And that was a very formative moment, because I hit rock bottom and I realized if it stays that way, I really don't want to live in this world anymore. And at the same time, I knew there is something marvelously beautiful to discover. And there is a lot to discover and to enjoy in this world. It's amazing. And I'm really grateful. Like today, I can do it a lot more than I used to. Yeah.
And that's so beautiful. And would you say that allowing yourself to be vulnerable was a greater part of this process? What do you think about vulnerability in enacting change?
Yeah, in a sense of having access to your emotions, that's an even more basic level, because if you decide, okay, I want to be vulnerable, you need to be able to navigate the basic, seas of yourself. And what I realized back then was that I had cultivated a very profound ability to ignore my emotions or detach myself from them. So I really had to learn to listen to what's going on within me. And of course, the depression and many of the physical patterns I still have today are all like, signs from my very smart unconscious system that there's something I need to look at. So I basically, I had the pain first, then I discovered that there are emotions which are actually worth to be looked at. And then I understood, okay, and then there's something in how I guide myself through this world, and this, I think, has a lot to do with vulnerability and openness. Yeah.
So, as those layers started to peel back, you took the time to look at feelings and thoughts that had been dormant for a very long time, and it's the pain and the difficulty and the eventual pressure that led you to that moment in the pool when saying, right, I'm going to change it all, and I'm going to take that chance.
Right, and the paradox thing is, of course, that the pain was caused by the fear of feeling pain, right? So your whole system is in pain because at some point you have learned to shut yourself down in order to avoid pain that could be done to you by others, which is a very weird mechanism, but a very powerful one. And I think, our world is dominated by that. Most organizational systems we work in are dominated by that mechanism. And of course, I do see it mostly because I'm aware of it, but still I think it's very relevant for how we live together.
And from an organizational sense, how does that play out? Is it not looking at the things that need to be solved, or it's avoiding the problems that have been laying dormant? What would you say? What would be the systemic approach towards this avoiding pain that causes this pain?
Yes, and I think there's a deeper layer to that, that we cultivate organizations and thus social systems where we learn to avoid genuine encounters. Because when you have a genuine encounter, you are honest, you speak your mind, there's space for emotions. And my hypothesis would be that if you have that, you will very quickly notice when things go the wrong way, because all your senses are allowed to play out their amazing capability of detecting when things are going the wrong way, right? We feel it in our guts or in our head or wherever. It's different for each person. And by not doing this, I think we are creating collective blind spots where we have this very delusional world of how we understand what we do and how we are as professional beings. And most of this is severely alienated from what we actually need. So these are undernourished systems. And I think to nourish them, it takes awareness, and it takes emotions, and it takes spirituality, etc., etc. And of course, it's really hard to sell that. But
join the club.
Yes,
yeah.
But as these systems are so undernourished, and they've tried everything to optimize and improve and solve their issues, with all means and consultants available, and now more and more people realize, okay, we've tried everything now. Maybe it's time to try something else. Because so many people are extremely fed up and they feel that their precious lifetime is absorbed by systems which are in their core deeply disrespectful for the lifetime we have, which creates a willingness to renegotiate what's there. No.
And starting to get the perspective of a systemic approach, it's the same as a self's interaction with the self, with aspects of the personality operating as that role of an oppressive, or maybe not oppressive, but a defense mechanism against feeling and the aspects of the self that feel.
Yes.
Would you say that that's correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I find that's inciting, to be able to gain that insight and to watch the layers of life unfold in such a fluid way, in such a way that the micro really is the macro.
Yes.
And that's where the I believe, and it feels like to me, the systemic starts to push towards the mystic, at least the experience of the mystical, at least the experience of a meaning in life that is not so easily grasped, but has a profound depth.
Yes.
And so, what would be an example or a story of that, maybe in the outside world, of that people would be aware of, maybe a business representing an individual as well, but a business going through that process of losing touch with its feelings and falling out of connection, not only with its individuals within it, but the people that it serves. Is there a story that is in the systemic handbook about the classical case study?
Well, I can tell you how I see the landscape we work with, and I think it's really interesting to note that the main pillars of the German economy are built on systemic destruction, of course, right? I mean, we have the automotive sector, we have the chemical sector. All these industries are based on the idea that you take resources the earth has given to us and extract them from the earth, and then usually done by cheap, very undignified labor. And then you take these resources and transform them into a product, which then causes harm to those who have not bought it. And the corporations who do this neither vouch for the cost they produce when they produce their products, nor do they vouch for the pain and sickness and environmental destruction they cause by the consumption of their products, right? And this, of course, can only be done if you as an individual create a blind spot that makes it possible for you to support this every day. And I know this may sound harsh, but I think the success of these industries and how they are governed usually by, their governance system usually is focused on numbers, right? And short-term profit. And issues like purpose and values do not really play a role. And I mean, this is not a caricature. This is what I see when I'm inside of these systems. That's like a systematic. It's like a regime that creates spaces where certain issues have not been speakable for many decades, and some of these companies are more than 100 years old, right? This goes back for a long time.
Yeah,
it's deeply ingrained, right? Just as like this whole principle of cost externalization and exploitation is deeply ingrained in the DNA of our society. And of course, these organizations mirror this. These are not like evil organizations who created to do bad. They mirror a principle which has been accepted as societal normal for a very long time.
So it's almost generational. So it's,
Yes.
it's the same story as the human family, is where the situations and the stories pass on along through the generation
Yeah.
as well.
Yes.
Wow.
So yeah, that it's like, yeah, it's absolutely. So we inherit something, and then something drastic needs to happen for us to look at what we do and realize, okay, what we do is actually, there could be a different normal. There could be a very different reality if we only decided to create it. And this, of course, is something which is happening there now, which is a very magic moment. Because you have this destructive normal where people really aim to push this normal for as long as possible, because it creates tremendous financial profit. It's absolutely ridiculous, the money they make. And then you have people, and this is a growing number inside of these organizations, who actually start to question this everyday mode, which of course requires some kind of individual, I would not say awakening, but a growth of sensibility. And this is actually something which can lead to very severe changes in how these organizations work. And that is the reason why we work with, for instance, car manufacturers, because we believe that the seeds that are starting to grow already have a systemic impact on these organizations, and this can be strengthened. And maybe, I'm not sure of that, but maybe they could even be part of the solution to some of the problems they caused, even though I'm not sure about this. Did I respond to your question?
Brilliantly.
Awesome.
Brilliantly. And so, as in your story, there was a series of blind spots that eventually reached a crescendo, which led you to doing something that you had never tried before, and it led you to making questions and decisions that were completely outside of your scope of comfort. And I guess that's exactly what these businesses do as well. As you said, in your sense, it's like it's hard to sell, and you are the last person they come to. But of course, it's always our emotions or what we're ignoring is also we're the last person we come to. We blame everything else except us first.
True.
And to bring that change forward, that pain until we have to try something that we've never tried before. And that's the same thing with me with working with people in meditation. I teach people who generally would never meditate. And that's my speciality. I teach skeptics and people that find the idea of meditation too much. And they've tried everything else. In my personal story, I tried everything. I tried all the drugs in the world. I tried all the work in the world. I tried all the ignoring in the world, and it can only last so long until suffering becomes so great. A catalyst must come along. And so often when we reach these layers of pressure and difficulty and changes knocking on our door, there is often somebody who pops up out of nowhere. And you're that person for these businesses, and to a degree in what I do, I'm that person for these people for meditation. And in your story, was there somebody as that time was reaching a crescendo and that pressure was rising? Was there somebody that arose that was able to challenge things or was able to give you a new perspective?
I'm a lucky person in that sense, because throughout my life, except for today, I guess, which is really a void in my life now, but I always had, I would not say mentors, but people who protected me in the sense that they made me understand that it is indeed possible to do things differently. I had this as a child, very important person, like a friend of my parents. She was a student back then. She's 20 years older than me, and she really, she was an anchor throughout my childhood and youth. That was important. And yeah, and like when I had this epic crisis, so to speak, I found someone. Yeah, I'm close friends with her now. She was recommended to me as an acupuncturist, and I had severe physical problems, and I tried everything before with these doctors who basically treat the symptom, and if it doesn't go away, they try something else, and by trying, they always earn money. I mean, it's a great business concept. I wish I came up with something as brilliant.
No, you don't.
No, no, I don't. But so I went to her, and what amazed me when we had our first appointment is not only like she created this like mini cosmos, like so you go, it's you know, this tiny room somewhere in Kreuzberg. And so you go there and you walk in, and there are landscapes drawn on the walls with Buddha sitting there and forests, and there's a tree in the middle of the room, and there's a 3D dragon coming out through the wall, winding itself through the whole building. It's absolutely amazing. So you come in there, you're like, what the fuck is that? And then she was there with a very amazing presence, very resolute, very dominant. I'm also very dominant, so we have a tendency to fight, I think. But what amazed me was, so I lay down, and there was not only a lot of warmth and acceptance, but also she told me what I had. I didn't have to tell her. She told me what I had as if I had known this woman for a very long time, and as if I had visited her very frequently already. It was really bizarre. And so she started acupuncturing me, and she gave me weird bags with Chinese herbs, and made me understand that there is no, there is no difference between mind and body, of course, and there is no difference between emotions and mind. So in a way, she was a very holistic teacher in how she treated me and how she pushed me to understand my own system. And I think she still thinks that I have a very lousy understanding of myself. As with every healer, she believes she's the only one who understands, which is fine. Consultants also have that, by the way. I'm the only one who sees the problem. They're just too stupid. Yeah, but that was marvelous. And like after like the third time, I was like, how about you come to Sicily for New Year's? And I was like, yeah, why not? And then I went there, and it was like all very bizarre, as if she had always been there. And so she really helped me, and she helped me. That was a form of guidance, which was very helpful, very relevant, because when I talk to her, I say things, and by saying things she doesn't need to say anything, I realize, okay, what I say, actually there is no fundament to this, or it feels wrong or whatever. So there's this very weird resonance chamber we create. Sometimes it happens. It's great.
Whereabouts were you? This was at the beginning of your journey of starting to come to a systemic understanding of yourself, I guess. Or...
Yeah, nicely put. Yeah.
And what was something after that was? How did you get into the systemic consulting world? It's not something that you kind of pick up a newspaper and find yourself.
Yeah, true. I don't know. In my first years, I did a lot of communications work, and I realized that what I did there was basically the translation of other people's bad decisions into something the other world was supposed to hear. I did not like that very much. And also I worked for many organizations that potentially are really very purposeful, but their culture on the inside makes it impossible for them to fill this with life. And I always wondered, how is it possible? I mean, how can we build organizations that enable us to do good instead of, hindering us from doing what we came to do in the first place? I think that was the initial motivation. But when you do these trainings, and I did very extensive systemic training actually, it tends to be extremely cognitive. And what really helped me expand my perspective, I think, was meditation and meditation retreats, because I think I saw myself from a bigger perspective, and refined my sense for the core that is actually there when you strip everything away. And that helps me do this work today.
So what keeps you grounded?
It keeps me grounded. Well, it's supposed to keep me grounded.
It's always there. You just gotta look.
I know.
But yeah, that's.
Yeah.
So maybe moving to a conclusion, because and we had a good chat,
yeah.
And I'm sure that it could have went for probably another 2 hours. I feel. What would be some of the things that you say to both businesses and to people to enact that change after prolonged periods of suffering? How to create a catalyst after years of generational change within you, or generational pathology, so to speak, or within your business? What are some of the tricks?
I think what's really helpful to realize is that change and maybe even transformation is something that never stops if you take it seriously. There's this Lalou term of emerging purpose, or however he calls it. So something which continuously changes with the outside world, that continuously changes. And if we take that seriously, we need to understand that we are basically part of this, constant stream where we constantly need to find the right place for doing what we deem worthy. And I think also what I'm trying to make people understand by presenting myself, I present myself, is that it's really helpful to be present, to be very genuinely present, with all your flaws and incompetencies, etc., etc., and to share this, because the quality of the interaction that sometimes results from that is very high. And I think it enables us to collaborate in a way that makes it superfluous to spend a lot of time with each other. So quantity kind of gets crossed out. And it enables us to step back and, do the things we do, and when we get back together, use the time in a very meaningful and respectful way, considering that we don't have a lot of time in this life. And I really do believe that this helps to focus on the essence of things, right? And of course, it takes the understanding of why I do the things I do, the values you base your work on, your life on, and how you actually are in this moment. So it's a lot it requires. This is nothing we learn in the institutions we come from. But it is something which I really believe can be achieved by everyone. This is something, you don't need a school for that. You don't need money for that. You don't need anything. You need, well, some food and, security, etc. But it's very basic. So I really do believe that, if people understand that we are all capable of enabling ourselves from, coming from responsibility we feel towards our own lives and the life around us, we can do something good. We don't need expensive trainings. We don't need expensive consultants. We don't need 100 meetings. We just need to focus and do what's right. And that's what it boils down to. It's very simple. Yeah.
Is there one German word for that? That would sum it up? I've got an English one.
What's the English one?
Genuineness.
Genuineness, yeah.
Genuine.
Yeah.
What's your phrase that you like to say that represents that?
To me, it really boils down to both responsibility, Verantwortung, towards ourselves and the systems we are embedded in. And if you take this seriously, that's a very profound thing. That's radical. And indeed, then Radikalität or radicalism is the other word. Because I think we waste our lives thinking about small things and doing small things, but radical things concern everyone within the system, be it you or everyone in the organization or everyone within society. But these are really the things we need to think about. How can we move forward radical change, which is transformation? We just say transformation because it sounds nicer. But what we mean is radical change.
I think that's incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
And so the radical change is meaningful because there's nothing on the edges. There's nothing on the extremes. That's what pushes creativity, but also and change and growth.
Yeah, and with the scope comes relevance, and with the relevance comes, hopefully, responsibility and a sense of, I'm with what I do, I serve, and it's not about me. It's like, I can also be well while doing this, but it's not about me. So you basically leave the pettiness of it behind. And of course, like everyone, I'm also absorbed in pettiness most of my days.
Yeah.
And yet, my longing and I think my basic perspective has transcended this pettiness in many regards. And this gives me a lot of freedom. And I think people feel that and they want a part of that. It's very exciting to feel it. Some envy it and are very negative, but most people want that. I think there's deep longing to create that sense. So basically, if this is what I can contribute to, this sense, this understanding of how we use our lifetime, that would be awesome. And I think it has nothing to do with, am I a consultant or am I a cleaning lady? It's just, is cleaning lady still politically appropriate to say? Probably not.
It is now.
Okay.
It's a structural stereotype.
Yes, it is.
Representing
It is,
particular-
absolutely.
yeah.
So can we cut this? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. So, but you know what I mean. I mean, it doesn't really. This has nothing to do with your profession, with your societal status. It doesn't have to do with your education. This is basically the baseline we all need to think about, and we need to live, and then we can dress it into these different forms. But I'm not very attached to the form I have right now. Like I can imagine to do something entirely different in 3 years, and that's great. No.
Responsibility and radical change, and people's yearning for that. I think that's a great place to leave it. I think that's picking up on a good way of spending a life.
Hopefully, yeah.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah,
Hello.
it was nice. Thank you, man.